Raiders, Colin. Oh, boy, a lot of new faces in the building as they look to create a winning culture in Sin City. They traded for Geno Smith in the offseason. You know, the expectation is he's going to get an extension. Geno enters the final year of his deal. Pete Carroll talked about locking up his quarterback at the league meetings, saying the team is continuing to work on a long-term deal. Colin, your thoughts on this Geno Smith situation? And I should report that Ashton Jeanty is now the betting favorite to land with the Raiders.
Yeah. Listen,
I have some thoughts on that.
We know all the funny money. The bottom line is you can pay Geno a lot, guarantee a lot, and it'll be a 2-year deal, maybe one. That's just the way these deals work. So it doesn't, we don't think Seattle's going to pay him like Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, so it's fine. Again, he's an adult on play action, which probably tells you why the Raiders should go get a running back early on play action. Geno's a top 6 quarterback in the league. He's a big guy who can throw darts if they have a substantial run game. He's not a guy that's going to come from behind with no run game, sling it 45 times. He'll make mistakes. So will almost all the league.
So you're on board for Ashton Jeanty at 6, an entirely new backfield, yeah. Ashton Jeanty and Geno Smith.
Yeah, I am.
Oh, okay. Not my bag, but the Raiders stink anyway. Final story.
What a weird dig at the last second. I don't understand. The Raiders are making moves. Like they're trending in the right direction. They made smart hires. They made smart free agency decisions. The draft again, and I already talked about Jeanty going to the Raiders, and so I don't want to kind of keep harping on that. I kind of want to talk about Geno a little bit more for this one specifically because I know Geno's a little bit older, but Colin pointed out, so credit to Colin, which I think was pretty smart. He's got a lot less tread, a lot less wear and tear on his tires, Geno, because he's played less relative to other players who are at his age. And the reality is when you watch Geno Smith play, if you had no idea what his age was, and you were just watching him play, you would not say, yeah, that looks like an older quarterback. When you saw Russ play, when you saw Aaron play, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford at times, not all the time, but at times, like, you could see the age. You could see the slowness. You could just tell, right? You could just be like, seems like that's like an older person, especially when you compare it to like someone who's like young and springy, like a Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, etc. And again, I'm not going to act like Geno Smith looks like he's like a 23-year-old out there, but he also doesn't look like he's, 35, 36 either. But again, it's always hard to predict how players will age like this. And in terms of a long-term deal, kind of like what Colin said was like, who knows what it actually ends up officially being in terms of, what you're on the hook for and all of that. But the sheer fact, I honestly personally love what the Raiders are doing. And someone in a previous video brought up a point where they said, Pete Carroll and Geno Smith couldn't really win in Seattle. Now they're going to win with the Raiders. And the reality is that Pete Carroll definitely let the game pass him by a little bit offensively. And, he's a defensive-minded coach and, an old-school coach in that regard. Not like a super traditional old-school coach when you think of like an old school coach like a Bill Belichick type person, someone who's like really serious and all about hard hitting and stuff like that. I think Pete Carroll's a little bit more of like a hybrid in that regard, but definitely wasn't someone who understood that the NFL was changing, that offense was becoming king, and that's on him obviously, but the Raiders are aware of that, and I'm sure Pete Carroll is aware of that, and that's why they went out and got Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly is a massive play here. I mean, it really is. Chip Kelly is supposed to be a really, 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 really high level, at this point, deeply experienced offensive mind. He is supposed to be back on the trajectory to being like an actual offensive head coach in the NFL. If anything, you can make the argument that he had a little bit too much success too early on in his career, which then, he was then with the Eagles, and that's a tough first job. For your first head coaching job in the NFL to be with the Philadelphia Eagles, that's a tough one. I mean, that is no easy place. And he wasn't even bad. The bad part about him was how he treated the players and how he treated them like a bunch of kids. And, it's a thing that sometimes these coaches do. You have that in basketball and football. They're not really good at transitioning from coaching 28-year-olds from 19-year-olds. It's just completely different. And you could also make the argument that he's not a great head coach, that he is just when he only has to worry about the offense, he can just do it. You know, he's not a great leader in that regard, right? He's not great at managing all the other aspects that you need to be as a head coach. But if you trust Chip Kelly's actual just pure offensive mind as a coordinator itself, and his game planning and his play designs and his play calling, etc., like that's where a lot of this comes from. It's always a two-prong approach. And I think what I'm realizing is that people still seem to kind of overlook that if you have a defensive head coach, you know, he's attacking the defense and you need that offensive coordinator. And if you have an offensive head coach, you need that defensive coordinator and he's going to be in charge of the defense. Like it's, you really ultimately in a lot of ways have two coaches in that regard. One for offense, one for defense. Now this changes a little bit when you have more of like the walk around coach, like more of like a Nick Sirianni or a Dan Campbell, etc. But that is what you're signing up for. So it's not just Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. The fact that people are barely even talking about Chip Kelly is actually really surprising to me. I can't grasp it. And make no mistake about it. If the Chicago Bears had a better coordinator, like if they had Cliff Kingsbury there, I think that season goes completely different. If Shane Waldron was with the Commanders, it goes completely different. I'm not telling you that their seasons would flip around and the Bears would be in the NFC Championship game and the Commanders would be nowhere. I'm not saying that, but it's different. Coaching, coordinating, like all of this stuff matters so much. And it's just like, it's crazy to me. And in a way, I'm grateful that I have to keep banging that drum because then it gives me something to talk about. But I find it so surprising that people aren't like kind of talking about, you know, it's pretty cool. Let's see what Geno Smith can do with Chip Kelly. Like this is going to be exciting. He's going to have like, you know, a pretty bright offensive, you know, and again, I understand most of his experiences in the, you know, in college, and he's had some experience in the NFL and some success and some failures, of course. But like I said, it's going to be in a slightly more narrow role now, like Cliff Kingsbury with the Commanders, which I think can benefit someone who's just wants to be like, I'm offense. Let me worry about offense right now. Like I don't think Cliff Kingsbury would have been as good of an offensive mind if he also had to run the entire team. If he was the head coach, I think eventually he can get there, but at least just not in this immediate moment. And so I just think that where Chip Kelly is with Geno Smith and what they're trying to do offensively, I think it's being under discussed. I think it's such a bigger play here, and you could make the argument that like Geno Smith could be set up to have like some of his best years now with this. That he's getting a coach who's just, you know, really ready to get after it. And then if you balance that out with a defensive head coach who's now going to take care of the defense, it's like boom, you're ready to rock here. So yeah, I mean they're obviously going to go up against tough defenses, which we've talked about in previous. You know, this division's like the division of the defenses actually when you really think about it, with the Broncos having a top defense, the Bills having the Chargers having a top defense, the Chiefs having a top defense, you know, so it's not going to be easy by no means. But I don't understand why that's being under discussed, or why people are saying like, oh, we're having a brand new backfield. No, okay, good luck. Like I don't understand why like that's the problem. Like that, like you think having Geno Smith, and if it is Jeanty, you know, getting Jeanty and Chip Kelly, that's somehow going to just like be bad, or you're going to have problems. Now, if you're saying, listen, they really need to prioritize their O-line or their defense is lacking in this or that, like that's a different conversation. That's fine. You can have that conversation. But I guess I'm just confused why we're acting like it's a some coordinator who we've never even heard of. Geno Smith, who's just absolutely washed and done, and just like, you know, like a you know, Joe Flacco kind of at this point. I can't think of anyone better, but like, or Kirk Cousins, which maybe he'll get his redemption. And then the running back is just, you know, I don't even know. So again, they went out in free agency and got Ezekiel Elliott. And there are people are like, all right, let's go. We got Kirk Cousins, Ezekiel Elliott, and John Smith as our coordinator. Like, okay, then I could understand the skepticism here. But you're talking about potentially getting an absolute beast and a workhorse of a running back. Whether you think you should draft him or not, different conversation, but a beast of a running back. A quarterback who's, for the last couple of years, has played really, really well, considering the circumstance that he's been given. And, again, I think a really, really, really high quality offensive coordinator in Chip Kelly, who's also coming off of, championship here and has actual legitimate NFL experience, who's had success in the NFL. Make no mistake about it. Had true measurable success in the NFL. He was going to the playoffs with Nick Foles and the Philadelphia Eagles. And yet we're just supposed to just act like this is just all like nothing. I don't understand. Again, some doubt makes sense, and some questions, or I should say questions, make sense more than just this kind of automatic doubt and then just jumping to, well, the Raiders stink anyway, so who cares? Well, they changed the team. They have different coaching now. They have different players. They have a different quarterback. Like, what? I hate when we act like these teams have souls, that no matter who we change, this is who these guys are. Like, this is who this team is. They don't. They are the players. The 2025 Raiders have nothing to do with the 2023 Raiders. They just have nothing to do with it. Like, it's just nothing. It's just completely different. Someone said this recently with the Eagles, where they said, Jalen Hurts isn't that good of a quarterback. They won a Super Bowl with Nick Foles. And I was like, this is a completely different team and a completely different coaching staff. Like, it actually has nothing to do with anything. You could say, he's lucky to be with such a great organization that can build great teams. Yeah, okay. That's a conversation that could be had. And it's one thing if it was the exact same coaching staff. Then I could say, oh, yeah, you know what? Nick Sirianni, he is an amazing coach, right? He really understands offense and building, coaching staffs and stuff. Like, sure, I could even understand that. But when you have essentially completely different players, minus like two players, Lane Johnson and Brandon Graham, I think at this point, field goal kicker, his name completely slipped my mind right now. It's just like, okay, and completely different coaching staff. Like, we got to stop acting like these teams have like this like lingering soul that has never left them since like the beginning of the NFL. So just to jump and say, the Raiders stink, like, you're basing that off of actually like fundamentally nothing. If they were running it back with the same coaching staff, same quarterback, or even a different coaching staff, I mean, I would still defend it, but still same quarterback, same everything. And they're like, they stink. Like, it's not actually based off anything. If you think like, this is going to take a couple years for them to get going, again, totally fair. But it's just like the automatic, like, they stink. Again, based on what? They're making actual concrete changes to improve their quality of play and how good they can be. And that team that stunk still had some really interesting games and some really interesting wins, specifically against the Chiefs and the Ravens. Now, I'm not the type of person, because I ripped Dak Prescott for this, where like, just because you played the Chiefs close and beat the Ravens means like, you're almost right there, right? Because that's what Dak said. He's been playing the Eagles kind of close for the last couple of years, and he's like, we're right there on the level with the Eagles. I check the record, and it's like, bro, you haven't even been to an NFC Championship game. The Eagles have been to 2 Super Bowls. Like, you're not really that close. But at the same time, especially when you're talking about playing now multiple teams like that, you can tell that there is still something there. To me, it at least signals that you're not a trash team and that some of those games aren't flukes. Because it's year to year and it's different teams entirely. So it feels less fluky and more kind of like, there's some wins here. If we can just play higher quality football, and have higher quality coaching, we can get some wins here. Very similar to with the Bears. You're like, there's some wins here. There were some close games here that you could have won. And again, it's not to say that you're on the level of the Lions or the Eagles or any of these other teams that you potentially played close or even won. But like, you're still like, there's something there. There's something there. And you can make the argument that for the Dallas Cowboys, sure. There was something there in 22 and 23. But you clearly were not good enough to take it to that next level or play that good in the playoffs. And then, so my question would be, well, then what changes did you make to get there? The answer is none. So therefore, you're not on that level. When you compare that to the Raiders, they are making changes. And maybe those changes take them in the wrong direction, perfectly possible, or they take them in the right direction. So, I don't know. I know everyone wants to I was just thinking about this before this video. I understand the feeling of like needing to reach conclusions right now, because I feel like people are afraid that they don't have anything to talk about if they don't already have conclusions. Like, The Chiefs are going to be back up there, a top team. The Raiders, they stink. The Eagles, they're repeating. Like, people need to have their takes solidified, because it makes them feel like, I think there's a lot of fear of, like, if I don't have my take fleshed out right now, who's going to listen to me? And I'm like always kind of being like, I don't have all these answers right now. It's April 1st. Like, you think I'm supposed to know exactly what all these teams are going to look like right now? That's insane. I don't even know what they look like until week 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, you're still figuring it out. Did the Eagles look like they were going to win the Super Bowl in the first few weeks? No. Did the Chiefs look like they were going to be able to make it to the Super Bowl? No. You know, I mean, did you think that the Ravens were going to beat the Bills? I mean, like, it's unpredictable. The Commanders were going to get to the NFC Championship game. The Lions were going to fall apart. You have no idea. So it's okay to not jump to a conclusion just yet, unless there's, like, really strong evidence. Like, I'm watching the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm like, they're not doing anything. And I fundamentally don't believe in the decisions that they've already made. So, yeah, I get a little bit more confident in that take. Now, if I thought they made a great coaching hire, and I thought that they went out and, you know, in free agency, they went out and picked up, you know, Devontae or, you know, whoever, then I'd be like, okay, these are some interesting moves. I don't know if this is enough, but these are some interesting moves. I'm interested to see what they'll look like next season. But since I see the decisions that they're making, I'm like, my conclusion is not good. I'm like, okay, well, then I'm not so sure how good they're going to be. But I don't understand how you can point to the Raiders, and they've upgraded in coaching on both sides of the ball, and they upgraded at quarterback, and now they're going to be drafting high. And so unless they absolutely just swing and miss in the draft, which is technically possible, but probably unlikely, they just swing and miss in the draft, I don't understand where you can jump to, like, oh, well, they just stink. I don't understand that. Again, I understand if you still think that they're going to struggle or that they're not going to be a top team or a great team. Again, totally understandable. But to go to the extreme, because if you think that they stunk last year and now they've improved, they have to be technically better. I don't know. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about, I almost said about the Washington Commanders, don't know where that came from, about the Las Vegas Raiders? Do you think they still stink? Are you optimistic this season about where they can go? Or do you think it's kind of, you know, this is more of a 1 to 2 year process rather than being able to kind of be competitive from the jump? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. It's whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.